December 1941, Sevastopol, Crimea. A 21-year-old woman lies motionless in the frozen rubble of what used to be someone's apartment building. She's been in the same position for 6 hours. Her finger hasn't moved from the trigger. Her eye hasn't left the scope. And 400 meters away, behind a stack of sandbags, a German officer is about to make a fatal mistake. His name is Major Erwin König. At least, that's what Soviet records claim. He's reportedly one of the Wehrmacht's best marksmen, sent specifically to hunt her down. And for the last 3 days, they've been playing the most dangerous game of cat and mouse imaginable. Her name is Lyudmila Pavlichenko, and by the time she leaves this war, she'll have 309 confirmed kills. But here's what most people don't know about history's deadliest female sniper. Her success had almost nothing to do with being a good shot. It was about something else entirely. Something the Red Army didn't teach her. Something she figured out on her own that would revolutionize Soviet sniper doctrine. And it started with a trick so simple, so obvious, that when she finally revealed it years later, military historians couldn't believe no one had thought of it before. To understand what Lyudmila Pavlichenko accomplished, you need to understand what she was up against, and more importantly, who she was before the war turned her into something else entirely. June 1916, Lyudmila Mikhailovna Belova is born in Bila Tserkva, a small town in what's now Ukraine. Her father works in a factory, her mother is a teacher. They're not wealthy, not connected, not special in any way that would predict what's coming. When she's 14, her family moves to Kyiv. This is 1930. Stalin's collectivization policies are destroying Ukrainian agriculture. Millions are starving. But in the cities, if you keep your head down and work hard, you can survive. You can even thrive. Lyudmila doesn't keep her head down. At 15, she joins a shooting club. Not because she's interested in hunting or sport shooting, but because a boy told her that shooting was a man's activity. According to her later accounts, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "We'll see about that." She becomes obsessed, not with guns, with being better than everyone else at the range. She practices 4, sometimes 5 times a week. By 17, she's won multiple regional championships. By 19, she's working at the Kyiv Arsenal factory as a grinder while studying history at Kyiv University. And by 1941, she's a 24-year-old graduate student with a passion for Soviet history and a marksman certificate that qualifies her as an expert shooter. Then Germany invades. June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa. 3 million Wehrmacht soldiers pour across the Soviet border. In the first 18 hours, the Luftwaffe destroys over 1,200 Soviet aircraft. Entire armies are encircled. Cities fall within days. Moscow expects Kyiv to last a week at best. Lyudmila is in the middle of her thesis research when she hears the news. She doesn't panic. She doesn't cry. She walks directly to the Army recruitment office and volunteers. The recruiting officer looks at her paperwork. University student, female, no military experience. He tells her to go home and help with the war effort by working in a factory or serving as a nurse. She tells him to look at her shooting scores. He does. Then he looks at her again. Then he makes a phone call. 3 days later, Lyudmila Pavlichenko is assigned to the 25th Rifle Division of the Red Army as a sniper, one of fewer than 2,000 women who will serve in Soviet sniper units during the war, and the only one who will achieve what she's about to achieve. But here's the thing. When she arrives at the front lines in August 1941, she has no idea how to be a military sniper. She knows how to shoot paper targets at a range. She's never shot at a living person. She's never been shot at. She's never spent hours lying in mud while shells explode around her. She's never had to decide in a split second whether the shape she sees moving 300 meters away is a combatant or a civilian. Her first kill nearly breaks her. August 1941. Belyevka, near Odessa. Lyudmila is deployed with her unit to defensive positions outside the city. The Germans are advancing. The Soviets are outnumbered, outgunned, and desperately trying to hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Lyudmila is assigned a position in a destroyed farmhouse. Her spotter is a veteran sergeant named Leonid Kitsenko. He's fought in the Winter War against Finland. He's seen things, he knows things, and he knows immediately that she's never done this before. He doesn't tell her it gets easier, he doesn't give her a pep talk. He just shows her where to set up, how to check her sight lines, how to stay invisible. Then he hands her a list of 8 rules for staying alive as a sniper. The first rule, never fire from the same position twice. The second rule, never establish a pattern. The third rule, never, ever think of the enemy as a person. That last one is the hardest. Her first target appears around noon, a German soldier walking along a trench line about 200 meters away. He's carrying a rifle. He's absolutely a combatant. He's absolutely a legitimate target. She puts the crosshairs on his chest, centers her breathing, begins the trigger squeeze, and freezes. Kitsenko doesn't say anything. He just watches through his binoculars, waits. The German soldier stops walking, pulls out a cigarette, lights it. For 30 seconds, he just stands there, smoking, completely unaware that he's being watched by someone who could end his life with a 3-pound trigger pull. Lyudmila later wrote in her memoirs that she spent those 30 seconds trying to see his face through the scope, wondering if he had a family, wondering if he was thinking about home, wondering if he was scared. Then he flicked the cigarette away, picked up his rifle, and started walking toward a position where he'd have a clear shot at Soviet soldiers in the trenches below. She fired. The rifle report echoed across the field. The German soldier dropped, and Lyudmila Pavlichenko sat there, shaking, trying not to vomit, while Kitsenko calmly logged the kill in his notebook and told her to pick a new position because they needed to move immediately. She asked him how he did it, how he could kill someone and just move on like nothing happened. He told her the truth. You don't. You just learn to do the job first and fall apart later. That night, back at camp, she did fall apart. She cried. She questioned everything. She nearly asked to be reassigned to a rifle unit where she wouldn't have to think so much about each individual person she killed. But she didn't, because the next morning, when she returned to the front lines, she saw what the Germans were doing to Soviet soldiers they captured. She saw what they were doing to civilians, and something hardened in her that never quite softened again. Her second kill happened that afternoon. She didn't hesitate. By the end of the first week, she had 12 confirmed kills. By the end of the first month, she had 54. And somewhere in there, something shifted. The fear didn't go away. It never goes away. But it became manageable, controllable, useful. She was learning. And what she was learning would change everything. September 1941. Odessa is surrounded. The Germans control the countryside. Soviet forces are trapped in the city, holding a defensive perimeter that shrinks a little more each day. Casualties are catastrophic. Entire battalions are being wiped out in hours. And in this chaos, Lyudmila Pavlichenko is thriving. By mid-September, her kill count is over 100. She's been mentioned in divisional dispatches. Other snipers are asking her for advice. Officers are requesting her specifically for difficult assignments. And she's starting to notice something that no one has taught her, something that's not in any manual. German soldiers are predictable. Not stupid, not incompetent, predictable. They follow procedures, they establish routines, they rotate guard shifts at regular intervals, they smoke at the same times, they use the same paths to move between positions, they congregate in the same spots. And if you watch them long enough, if you're patient enough, you can map out their entire day. Most snipers at this time are using what's called the hunt method. You move to a position, watch for targets of opportunity, take your shots, and relocate. It's effective, but inefficient. You might spend hours waiting for a target to appear. You might take one shot per day, maybe two if you're lucky. Lyudmila realizes there's a better way. She starts studying German positions for days before engaging. She documents patrol routes. She notes when and where officers appear. She identifies choke points, places where German soldiers have to pass through narrow areas where they can't avoid exposure. Then she sets up in positions that cover these choke points and waits. Not for hours, for days. She'll occupy a hide site for 48, sometimes 72 hours without moving. Minimal food, minimal water, no bathroom breaks. She brings a container and uses it without leaving position. She doesn't sleep, she just watches. And when her targets move through the kill zone she's identified, she takes them down methodically. 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 in a single morning. Then she disappears. By October, she's refined the technique even further. She's noticed that German units respond to sniper fire in predictable ways. They send out patrols to hunt the sniper. They bring in their own sharpshooters. They saturate the area with machine gun fire. All standard procedure, all exactly what you'd expect. So she starts using that against them. Here's the trick. She makes herself known. She takes a shot from one position, then immediately relocates to a pre-planned secondary position with a clear view of the first location. When German soldiers come to investigate where the shot came from, she takes them down from the new position. When reinforcements arrive, she has a third position ready. By the time they figure out what's happening, she's gone. It's called reflexive shooting, or reaction fire tactics, and while the concept existed in theory, no one had implemented it this systematically. Lyudmila doesn't know she's inventing doctrine, she just knows it works. The numbers prove it. In October alone, she records 63 confirmed kills. In November, another 58. By the time Odessa is evacuated in mid-October, the city held for 73 days, far longer than anyone expected, Lyudmila has 187 confirmed kills, and she's developed a reputation. German soldiers are warned about her specifically. They call her the Russian she-wolf. Intelligence reports describe her as highly dangerous and a priority target. The Wehrmacht is actively hunting her, which means she needs to get smarter. December 1941. Sevastopol. The siege has begun. After evacuating Odessa, Lyudmila's unit is redeployed to Crimea to defend the city of Sevastopol, home to the Soviet Black Sea Fleet. It's strategically vital. If it falls, the Germans control the Black Sea. Stalin has ordered the city held at all costs. The Germans know this. They've committed massive resources to taking it. Artillery pounds the city daily. The Luftwaffe drops thousands of tons of bombs. Ground assaults come in waves. Soviet defenders are pushed back street by street, building by building. For snipers, it's both paradise and hell. The urban ruins provide endless hide sites and shooting positions, but they also provide endless places for enemy snipers to hide, and the Germans are bringing in their best. According to Soviet records, though German archives don't confirm this, sometime in early December, a sniper named Erwin König arrives in Sevastopol. The accounts describe him as a decorated Wehrmacht officer, a skilled marksman, and someone specifically tasked with eliminating Soviet snipers. Whether König existed as described is debated by historians. Some think he's a composite of several German snipers. Some think he's entirely fictional, a propaganda creation. But Lyudmila's own accounts and the accounts of soldiers who served with her describe a real engagement with an exceptionally skilled enemy sniper during this period. For simplicity, we'll use the name the Soviets used, König. The story begins when several Soviet snipers are killed in the same sector over a 3-day period. All of them are shot in the head or upper chest, precision shots from distances over 300 meters. All of them are killed from positions they thought were secure. Someone very good is hunting them. Lyudmila is assigned to investigate. She spends 2 days studying the sector, looking at where the Soviet snipers were positioned, analyzing sight lines, trying to figure out where the enemy sniper is operating from. She narrows it down to 3 possible positions: a destroyed bell tower, a collapsed factory roof, and a partially standing apartment building. She sets up in a position that gives her a view of all 3 locations, and she waits. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, nothing. On day 3, early morning, she sees it. A barely perceptible movement in a 4th-floor window of the apartment building. Not one of the positions she'd identified. Smarter than that. She doesn't shoot, she just watches. 45 minutes later, she sees it again. A shift in the shadows, the faintest glint of glass, a scope catching light. Now she has a choice. She can take the shot now while she has a target, but the angle is bad, the distance is long, nearly 400 meters, and if she misses, she reveals her position to someone who definitely won't miss. Or she can wait, study his pattern, find a better angle. She waits. Over the next 2 days, she maps out König's routine. He arrives before dawn, stays in position until mid-morning, disappears for several hours, returns in the late afternoon. He's patient, disciplined, exactly what you'd expect from a trained professional. But he has one weakness. He uses the same window. Different positions within the room, but always the same window, which means Lyudmila can predict where he'll be. On the 4th day, she changes her position, moves to a different building with a better angle on his window, sets up in darkness, waits for dawn. He arrives on schedule. She can see him clearly now through her scope. He's adjusting his rifle, checking his sight lines. For a few seconds, he's still. She fires. Miss. The bullet hits the window frame 6 inches to his left. She sees him drop immediately, disappearing into the room, and she knows she's made a massive mistake because now he knows where she is. She relocates immediately, moves 3 floors down, different wing of the building, different angle, sets up and watches her old position. 10 minutes later, 3 bullets slam into the spot where she'd been. Precise, methodical. If she'd still been there, she'd be dead. Now it's personal. For the next 3 days, they hunt each other. She takes a shot from one position, he responds from another. He reveals his location, she's already moved. They're both too skilled to make obvious mistakes, too experienced to fall for simple tricks. It becomes a test of patience, discipline, nerve. The breakthrough comes on day 7. Lyudmila has repositioned to a crater in no man's land. It's dangerous. She's exposed on multiple sides, but it gives her a clear view of König's building. She's been there for 8 hours when she sees movement. Not König, a German soldier walking along the 2nd floor, clearly visible through a destroyed wall. Easy shot, but she doesn't take it, because 30 seconds later she sees the trap. The soldier isn't walking randomly. He's following a specific path at a specific pace, clearly visible.
It's bait. König is trying to draw her out. But the presence of bait tells her something important. König is in position, watching, waiting for her to fire so he can trace the shot. So she does something unexpected. She takes the shot. The German soldier drops, and in the split second after her rifle fires, she's watching König's window through her scope because she knows he's going to react. He's going to shift position to get a better angle on where her shot came from. And when he moves, for just a fraction of a second, he's going to be visible. She sees it. The shadow shifting in the window, the shape of a helmet, the outline of a scope. She fires again. Through her scope, she sees König's rifle fall forward through the window, sees it tumble 3 stories and hit the street below. She doesn't see König, but she doesn't see him move again either. Soviet soldiers later search the building. They find blood, spent shell casings, evidence that someone was there, but no body. Whether König died from the wound, whether he was evacuated, whether he even existed at all, that's lost to history. What's not lost is what Lyudmila learned from the engagement. Sometimes the best way to hunt a hunter is to let them think they're winning. By January 1942, Lyudmila Pavlichenko has 257 confirmed kills. By April, it's 287. And on June 2, 1942, she makes her 309th and final kill before everything changes. Let's talk about what those numbers actually mean. In modern military doctrine, a confirmed kill as a sniper requires independent verification, usually a spotter, sometimes physical evidence, sometimes command observation. The standard is high because armies don't want inflated numbers. During World War II, Soviet standards were even stricter. Every kill had to be logged, witnessed, and verified by an officer. Lyudmila's spotter, Leonid Kitsenko, maintained detailed records, dates, locations, circumstances, and every single one was reviewed. 309 confirmed kills in 11 months. That's roughly 28 per month, about 1 confirmed kill every single day she was in combat. But here's what makes it even more remarkable. Snipers don't fight every day. Weather, ammunition shortages, redeployment, rest periods, there are stretches where no combat operations happen at all. Historians estimate that Lyudmila had between 180 and 200 actual combat days during those 11 months, which means her real average is closer to 1.5 to 1.7 kills per combat day. For context, the top American sniper in World War II, Chuck Marwini, had 103 confirmed kills over 16 months in Vietnam. Carlos Hathcock, one of the most famous snipers in history, had 93 confirmed kills during his entire career. Chris Kyle, whose autobiography became a best-selling book and film, had 160 confirmed kills over 4 deployments. Lyudmila did 309 in less than a year. But the numbers only tell part of the story. What made her exceptional wasn't just accuracy. Lots of snipers are accurate. It wasn't just courage. Lots of soldiers are courageous. What made her exceptional was methodology. She approached sniping like a science. She documented patterns. She tested techniques. She analyzed failures and adjusted. When something worked, she repeated it. When something didn't work, she discarded it. And most importantly, she shared what she learned. By early 1942, Lyudmila is teaching other snipers. Not formally, there's no time for formal classes in Sevastopol, but in the field, during lulls in combat, she explains her methods, the importance of patience, the value of multi-day observation, the concept of using the enemy's own procedures against them. Some of her students go on to become highly effective snipers themselves. Nina Lubkovskaya, who trained with Lyudmila in Sevastopol, ended the war with 89 confirmed kills. Alia Muldagulova, though she trained elsewhere, used similar techniques and achieved 91 confirmed kills before being killed in action in 1944. But Lyudmila's combat career is about to end, not because she dies, not because she's wounded out of commission, but because she becomes more valuable somewhere else.
June 2nd, 1942. Sevastopol. The siege has intensified. German forces have broken through the outer defensive lines. The city center is under constant artillery bombardment. Soviet defenders are fighting block by block. Everyone knows the city is going to fall. It's just a matter of when. Lyudmila is positioned in the ruins of a school building, covering a retreat route for Soviet infantry. She's been in position for 16 hours. She's exhausted, running on adrenaline and willpower. Then a mortar round hits the building. She doesn't remember the explosion. 1 second she's watching through her scope, the next she's buried in rubble, bleeding from multiple shrapnel wounds. The most serious is a deep laceration across her face. She's also got shrapnel in her shoulder and leg. Her spotter drags her to cover, calls for a medic, and when they pull her out of the rubble, her combat career is over. She's evacuated by submarine, one of the last to leave before Sevastopol falls on July 4th, 1942. She spends 3 weeks in a military hospital in Moscow, recovering from her injuries. The wound on her face leaves a permanent scar. The shoulder wound limits her range of motion. She could probably return to combat eventually, but Stalin's government has other plans. July 1942. Lyudmila is summoned to Moscow. She's expecting a medal ceremony, maybe a propaganda photo shoot. What she gets is a meeting with Soviet officials who tell her she's being sent to America. This is the height of World War II. The Soviet Union and the United States are allies, but it's an uneasy alliance. Stalin needs American military aid, weapons, vehicles, supplies. Roosevelt is willing to provide it, but American public opinion is divided. Many Americans are skeptical of the Soviet Union. Some are actively hostile. So the Soviets decide to send a delegation to America to build public support. And Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the deadliest female sniper in history, is exactly the kind of story that will capture American attention. August 1942. Lyudmila arrives in Washington, D.C. as part of a Soviet youth delegation. She's 25 years old, she speaks minimal English, she's wearing her military uniform with her medals, and she's about to become an international celebrity. She meets First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. She gives speeches at rallies in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. She speaks to crowds of thousands with translators, telling them about the war on the Eastern Front, about what Soviet soldiers are facing, about what's at stake. The American press is fascinated by her, but not always in ways she appreciates. Reporters ask her about her lipstick, about her uniform, about whether she wears makeup in combat. One journalist asks if Soviet women are allowed to wear makeup. Lyudmila's response, delivered through a translator at a press conference in Chicago: "Gentlemen, I am 25 years old, and I have killed 309 fascist occupants by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The room goes silent, then erupts in applause. She spends 3 months in America, raises substantial support for the war effort, meets with labor unions, student groups, political organizations. She's effective because she's authentic. She doesn't sugarcoat the war. She doesn't minimize the sacrifices. She just tells the truth. And the truth is compelling. In October 1942, she returns to the Soviet Union. She's awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest honor the country can bestow. She's given the Order of Lenin. She's promoted to Major.
And she's assigned to train other snipers for the remainder of the war. She never returns to combat, but her impact on Soviet sniper doctrine is profound. The techniques she developed, prolonged observation, pattern recognition, reflexive firing positions, become standard training. By 1945, the Red Army has over 2,000 female snipers, many of them trained using methods Lyudmila pioneered.
May 1945. The war ends. Lyudmila is 28 years old. She spent 4 years in service. She's killed 309 people. She's been wounded. She's been celebrated. She's been turned into a propaganda symbol. And now, she has to figure out how to be a civilian again. It's not easy. She returns to Kiev, completes her university degree, gets her master's degree in history, eventually becomes a historian and a researcher. She writes her memoirs. She gives lectures. She serves on various Soviet committees and organizations. But she's haunted by the war. She has nightmares. She struggles with what we'd now call PTSD. She rarely talks about the specific details of combat with anyone except other veterans. When journalists ask her about her feelings during combat, she shuts down. Those questions, she says, come from people who have never experienced war and have no right to ask them. She marries, has a son, gets divorced. The record suggests the marriage fails, at least in part, because her husband can't handle her celebrity status and the psychological weight she carries from the war. In the 1950s and 60s, she becomes a prominent figure in Soviet veterans organizations. She advocates for better support for disabled veterans. She speaks publicly about the cost of war, not just in lives, but in psychological damage. She's ahead of her time in understanding trauma. And she stays connected to the women she served with. There's a bond there that no one else can understand. They're the only people who know what it was like, who can talk about it without judgment or misunderstanding. In 1957, she's invited back to the United States for a reunion with Eleanor Roosevelt. They've stayed in contact through letters. When they meet again, 15 years after their first meeting, they embrace like old friends. Eleanor Roosevelt later writes that Lyudmila Pavlichenko is one of the most remarkable people she's ever met. Lyudmila lives quietly in Moscow for the rest of her life. She writes, she teaches, she remembers, and she refuses to romanticize what she did. In one of her last interviews in 1973, a journalist asks her if she's proud of her kill count. She thinks for a long time before answering. Then she says, "I am proud that I defended my country. I am proud that I did my duty. But I am not proud that I had to kill 309 people. I wish the war had never happened. I wish none of it had been necessary." Lyudmila Pavlichenko dies on October 10, 1974, at the age of 58. The cause of death is a stroke. She's buried in Moscow's Novodevichy Cemetery, a place reserved for Russia's most distinguished citizens. Her grave is marked with a simple stone. No grand monument, no elaborate inscription. Just her name, her dates, and the title, Hero of the Soviet Union. So what was the trick? The technique that made Lyudmila Pavlichenko the deadliest female sniper in history. It wasn't supernatural aim. It wasn't fearlessness. It wasn't even the multi-position technique or the pattern recognition, though those were important. The trick was simple. She treated sniping like research. Remember, Lyudmila was a history student. She was trained to gather evidence, analyze sources, identify patterns, and draw conclusions. She approached combat the same way she approached her studies, methodically, analytically, without emotion clouding judgment. Most snipers at the time relied on instinct and experience. They developed skills through trial and error. They learned what worked by surviving what didn't work.
It was effective, but inefficient. Lyudmila documented everything. She kept detailed notes on German positions, patrol routes, behavioral patterns, response times. She treated each engagement as a data point, and over time, she built a comprehensive understanding of how German units operated. This gave her an enormous advantage. When other snipers were reacting to what they saw in the moment, she was predicting what would happen next. When others were taking shots of opportunity, she was creating opportunities. It sounds obvious now. Modern military doctrine emphasizes this kind of analytical approach. Special operations forces use detailed intelligence gathering and pattern analysis as a matter of course. But in 1941, this was revolutionary, especially for a 24-year-old with no formal military training. And here's the thing, she shared it. She didn't keep her methods secret. She didn't hoard her knowledge to maintain her status as the top sniper. She taught everyone who would listen, because she understood that the goal wasn't personal glory, it was winning the war. This is what separates exceptional performers from merely good ones in any field. It's not about being the best. It's about making everyone around you better. But there's a darker side to this story that needs to be addressed. Lyudmila Pavlichenko killed 309 people. That's not a metaphor. That's 309 individual human beings who died because she pulled the trigger. Some of them were active combatants engaged in warfare. Some of them were just soldiers following orders in a war they didn't start. All of them were someone's son, brother, husband, father. Modern historians debate the ethics of celebrating snipers. The argument goes, we rightly condemn civilian casualties and war crimes, but we celebrate individuals who killed hundreds of people. Isn't that a contradiction? It's complicated. Lyudmila was fighting a defensive war against an invasion. Germany invaded the Soviet Union. German forces committed massive atrocities against Soviet civilians. The Wehrmacht was actively participating in genocide. In that context, Soviet soldiers, including snipers, were defending their homeland against an existential threat. But Lyudmila herself seemed to understand the moral complexity. She never celebrated her kills. She never bragged. In interviews, she consistently emphasized that she did what was necessary, not what was enjoyable. She wished it hadn't been necessary. And after the war, she became an advocate for peace. She spoke publicly about the cost of war. She opposed Cold War militarism. She argued that her experiences proved war should be avoided at almost any cost. That's the real legacy. Not the 309 kills, not the celebrity status, not even the tactical innovations. The legacy is that she experienced the worst that humanity can do to itself and came out of it arguing for something better.
Lyudmila Pavlichenko didn't fight alone. She was one of roughly 2,000 female snipers who served in the Soviet military during World War II. And their collective story is one of the most remarkable and overlooked aspects of the war. Soviet women didn't just serve in support roles. They flew combat aircraft. They served in tank crews. They fought as infantry. Nearly 800,000 Soviet women served in the military during World War II. They represented about 3% of total Soviet military personnel. Compare that to the United States, where women served primarily in auxiliary roles, like the WACs and WAVES, with no combat positions, or Britain, where women served in anti-aircraft units but were officially classified as non-combatants. The Soviet Union was the only major combatant nation that integrated women into frontline combat roles. Why? Partly necessity.
The Soviet Union suffered catastrophic casualties in the early years of the war. They needed every able-bodied person. Gender couldn't be a disqualifying factor when survival was at stake. But partly ideology. Soviet communism officially promoted gender equality. In practice, Soviet society was still deeply patriarchal, but the official ideology created space for women to demand combat roles, and when the war started, they did. Female snipers were particularly effective. Soviet military analysis from the war concluded that women made excellent snipers for several reasons. They were patient. They could remain still for longer periods. They were detail-oriented. They were less likely to take unnecessary risks for personal glory. Those are stereotypes, of course. Not all women possessed those traits. Not all men lacked them. But the data supported the conclusion that female snipers performed as well or better than their male counterparts. The top 5 deadliest Soviet snipers of World War II. Mikhail Surkov, 702 confirmed kills, male. Ivan Sidorenko, 500 confirmed kills, male. Nikolai Ilyin, 494 confirmed kills, male. Fyodor Okhlopkov, 429 confirmed kills, male. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, 309 confirmed kills, female. She's the only woman in the top tier, but there are others. Rosa Shanina, 59 confirmed kills, killed in action in 1945. Nina Lobkovskaya, 89 confirmed kills, survived the war. Natalia Kovshova, 167 confirmed kills, killed in action in 1942 while conducting a suicide attack when surrounded. These weren't exceptions. They were part of a systematic effort to utilize female snipers, and it worked. But after the war, their stories were largely forgotten. The Soviet Union celebrated male veterans. Female veterans were encouraged to return to traditional roles, marry, have children, be good Soviet mothers, don't talk about the war. Many female veterans struggled with this transition. They'd proven themselves in the most extreme circumstances possible. They'd fought, they'd led, they'd excelled, and now they were told to go back to being secretaries and factory workers. Lyudmila was lucky. She had education. She had status. She could carve out a role for herself as a historian and a public figure. Most female veterans didn't have those advantages. It wasn't until the 1960s and 70s that Soviet society began seriously acknowledging female veterans' contributions. By then, many had died. Their stories were lost. We'll never know the full scope of what they accomplished. But we know Lyudmila's story, and it matters. Here's what most people miss about Lyudmila Pavlichenko's story. We focus on the 309 kills, the sniper duels, the celebrity tours, the medals and honors. And those things are important. They're dramatic. They're compelling. But the most important thing Lyudmila did was survive. Think about what survival meant in her context. The average life expectancy of a Soviet soldier on the Eastern Front was weeks, not months. For snipers, it was even shorter. You're a priority target. You're operating in dangerous positions. You're taking risks every single day. Most snipers who achieved high kill counts died in combat. Lyudmila survived 11 months of frontline combat. She survived the defense of Odessa. She survived the siege of Sevastopol. She survived being hunted by German counter-snipers. She survived until she was wounded badly enough to be evacuated. And then she survived the transition to civilian life. That might have been harder. PTSD wasn't well understood in the 1940s. Veterans were expected to just move on, especially female veterans who faced the additional pressure of conforming to traditional gender roles after proving they could excel in combat. Many couldn't handle it. Suicide rates among female Soviet veterans were significantly elevated in the post-war period. Lyudmila survived that too. She built a life. She contributed to society. She honored her fallen comrades. She advocated for peace. And she left a record, memoirs, interviews, training materials that ensures we remember. That's the real trick, the real achievement. Not the killing, but the surviving. Not the war, but what came after. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. War produces heroes and casualties. Sometimes they're the same people. Lyudmila was both. She was a hero for defending her country. She was a casualty for carrying the psychological scars of what she experienced. But she was also a survivor. She endured. She adapted. She found purpose beyond combat. And she used her platform to argue that her experiences should never be repeated. In her final interview before her death, a journalist asked her what she wanted people to remember about her. She said, "I don't want people to remember the number. I want them to remember that war requires ordinary people to do extraordinary things, and that we should do everything possible to ensure those extraordinary things are never necessary again."
309 confirmed kills in 11 months. One woman, one rifle, one unshakable commitment to defending her homeland. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's story is about more than sniping. It's about what humans are capable of when survival is at stake. It's about intelligence, determination, and the willingness to adapt. It's about the cost we pay for those capabilities. And it's about whether we learn anything from that cost. So here's my question for you. Knowing what Lyudmila accomplished and what it cost her, the lives she took, the trauma she carried, the person she became, was it worth it? Could she have done anything differently? Or was she simply doing what survival required in impossible circumstances? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if this story made you think differently about war, about heroism, about survival, hit that subscribe button. There are thousands of stories like this, stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things in impossible situations. And we're going to keep telling them. Thanks for watching.